My name's Kate Bardwell. I'm the Associate University Librarian from the University of Otago, and I'm the Deputy Chair of ANZREG. So it's my pleasure to welcome you here today and to introduce our keynote speaker. So I will do that right now. We are very lucky to have Masud Khokhar here to join us today. Masud is the Assistant Director, Digital Innovation and Research Services at Lancaster University. He is responsible for managing library strategy and service development for a number of areas, and I'm just going to rattle off a few. Open science, research intelligence, digital research and scholarship, digital humanities, unique and distinctive collections, and digital infrastructure. And I would not like to have your job, Masud. So Masud is very passionate about effective use of technology to drive innovation and advancements in the field of information management and library science. So in his keynote presentation, he's going to touch on a range of topics. He has an hour and we're going to leave about 10 minutes for questions at the end. But the things that Masud is going to touch on is Ex Libris Explorer, research data and repositories, and Lancaster University strategy relating to library services. So I'll hand it over to Masud. We'll let you do your presentation. We will have questions at the end and we will be using microphones because this is recorded for Zoom. So make sure if you do have a question, wait till you get that microphone, otherwise we're going to lose the question. So thank you, Masud.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the lovely introduction and thank you for the invitation. What an honor and privilege to be here amongst esteemed colleagues and some of you who I meet in other conferences, and I've always had an amazing feeling and reputation about the Australian library market anyway. So I'm very, very honored to be here. So thank you so much for the invitation in the first place. I'm going to start my presentation, but just want to say that on purpose, I will be very, very brief about anything Ex Libris, which sounds contrary to this conference itself, but I thought you would be hearing about Ex Libris stuff so much, I might not bore you with another one. I thought I'll start with something different. I'll be talking primarily about where I see the role of academic libraries is in the future, especially in a digital and global world. And what my feeling is, of course, my feeling is not always right, 80% maybe. But it would be great to have your input into that at the end and whether you think that's also applicable to the Australian market or not, or whether there are different viewpoints here because it's also a learning opportunity for myself. So thank you again for the introduction. I just want to add a slight caveat that if you want to get in touch with me after 13th of August, I'm moving jobs. I'll be the Director of Library and Archives at the University of York. So the email syntax remains the same except for the university part. So if you're contacting me after 13th of August, please use this or tweet me. Right, so before I start, I think it's probably worth giving you an introduction to what the university is about. So that gives you an idea. Also, I've converted this into PDF for Zoom, so all the snazzy animations are gone, so apologies for that. So Lancaster University is a top 10 university in the UK consistently. We are top 10 in all the three major national rankings, 6th, 8th, and 9th. And we are also 135th in the QS World University Rankings and 150th in the Times Higher Education University Rankings. The university has a clear ambition to be in the top 100 in the next 5 years. For those of you who are wondering what that word TEF is, that's Teaching Excellence Framework. That's our counterpart to Research Excellence Framework, which is like your ERA over here. I'm not sure whether you have a similar Teaching Excellence Framework, but if not, it will eventually come. There's a third one as well that's just being introduced in the UK, which is called KEF, which is Knowledge Exchange Excellence Framework. So we do like our frameworks of excellence. And that's all about the industrial strategy going forward. We are also just been awarded the Times and the Sunday Times University of the Year Award. We are very proud of that. So any Lancaster presentation will always have that statement in it. We've been the top university in the northwest of the England for about 10, 11 years running. As well as, so we consider ourselves a medium-sized university. For you, it's very, very small, most likely, 13,000 students, but in the UK market, that's a medium-sized university. And we also have 2 campuses, one in Ghana and one in China, which also brings different kind of challenges. Both campuses have libraries as well, and also data privacy issues and lots of other things that go with that. Right. Just a quick description of some of these pictures. So that's Lancaster University Library, established in a 560-acre parkland area. So we are very lucky that we're surrounded with beautiful greenery all around us. And that's M6 motorway, one of the big motorways that's cutting across us. That's one of our lakes, very beautiful during the sunset. But the most important thing you need to remember about Lancaster is our ducks. They are world-renowned. And if you want to keep up to date with what's happening in terms of duck activity at Lancaster, start following @LancasterDuck on Twitter. They have their own Twitter account. Right, so about Lancaster University Library. In the last 2 years, we've won the joint top position for Times Higher Education Student Experience Survey. That survey looks at different aspects of social life of students on university, not academic life. And library and learning services is one of the key elements of that. And we've won the joint top position for the last 2 years. We've also scored our highest ever rating in National Student Satisfaction Survey, which is 92%. The best score ever is about 95%. So we are very happy that we are touching the boundaries of that. In terms of the buildings, I've mentioned the international libraries, but we have about 3 different libraries or library-like places on campus. One of them is the main library, which you can see over here. One of them is the Ruskin Research Center and Library, which is a dedicated special collections library on the works of John Ruskin. The architect thought that it would be great to develop a building which would be in a fish bowl kind of architecture. Looks amazing, but buying furniture for this is horrible. This is an inside picture of the learning zone, which is an informal study space. There are no collections there. It's literally come in, eat whatever you want, shout whatever you want kind of space. And that's one of the pictures from inside of the library. We're very proud of this tree that was imported from Norway. It's an all-season tree. To be fair, UK only has 1 season anyway, grey and rainy. But it's really popular. And the day we opened the library, the refurbished library, a girl, the very first girl who entered, came and hugged the tree and said, "I would like to call it Norman." So the tree is called Norman. We have 4 main staff teams in the library. Academic services, which look after primarily relationships with departments and faculties, as well as teaching and learning elements. The digital innovation and research services, which is kind of 2 sub-teams, but both under my remit. About 14 people in that team. Operations and user services, which look after the front line of the library, as well as the building itself. And learning development, whose core focus is to support students who are coming from low participating neighborhoods or people who are struggling to get used to university's independent study elements, and they teach them on confidence building, math skills, English skills, etc., etc. And as I mentioned, we have libraries in China and Ghana as well. Right, so for today, I'm going to talk about 4 different things. 1, digital disruption and leadership. 2, how should we bridge the digital skills gap? 3, libraries as incubators of scholarly development. And 4, how can we tackle some of these challenges that are coming our way? So I'll link into Ex Libris elements wherever I can, including Explorer and Research Data Shared Services and others. But I'm also hoping that this presentation is just a starting point, and you can speak to me at any time throughout the conference or Developers Day and about any of these topics or other things which I'm sure I can give you a flavor of if I'm not an expert in. Right, so let's start with digital disruption and leadership, a topic that's very, very close to my heart. So I picked an Australian article to begin with. So that's by Linda Christiansen from Swinburne University, the Vice Chancellor over there. And it's called Digital Disruption in Academia, Are We Ready for Uberversities in 10 Years? Now, if I say Uber in front of a UK audience, everyone will be like, oh no, don't want to go that way. They're ruining all the industry and everything. But the point is, they have disrupted the industry. Whether for the positive or negative, that's an individual feeling about it, but they have disrupted the industry. Similarly, if you want to look at other organizations like that, Airbnb is another example, Netflix is another example. Funny thing is, they don't actually own any of those services. So Netflix doesn't own any cinemas, Uber doesn't own any taxis, Airbnb doesn't own any actual hotels or places like that. So that's a disruption model where you're using existing infrastructure to completely disrupt an industry. And Linda's viewpoint on this one is that might also happen to the education industry. We are very ingrained in our own thinking about how education should be like, but education is changing and the skill set that's required is changing. So when I was showing you the Lancaster University campus and there was this M6 running across it, there was a reason why I was highlighting that. M6 is the busiest part of the UK motorway network for truck and lorry drivers. Lancaster University is right next to it. One of the things we are looking at is in about 5 to 6 years' time, that's our prediction, max 10 years' time, 9,000 of those truck drivers will be out of a job. Because we believe that because those motorways are primarily straight, obstruction-free, have often truck lanes, they'll all be automated with self-driving trucks. We also think that about 3,000 of those 9,000 will move into different jobs within the same sector, but 6,000 will be actually out of job and will require reskilling. Do they want to do a degree? Do they want to do a vocational course? Do they want to do a 2-year degree, 1-year degree? All of those questions are now bubbling up about whether the 3-year, 4-year degree model is the right model. And that's really challenging us on how we think about disruption in educational sector itself. There are, of course, external factors. As some of you might know, UK has been, in my opinion, stupid enough to get out of Europe. What that actually means is that's also disrupting how education works, how overseas students come to the UK. Australian market, we predict Australian and Canadian markets would really benefit from that if there are hindrances in the UK. So we're looking at how we can circumvent some of those issues here as well. The other article, if you're interested in the American viewpoint, so that's the Australian viewpoint, I'll give you the UK viewpoint, but there's an American viewpoint article, which is Data Technology and the Great Unbundling of Higher Education. And that's looking at the traditional 4 R's in the in the US market, which is rankings, research. I can't remember the third one, but the 4th one is called RA, which is sports. Sports is massive for them. And the idea behind them is that most prestigious institutions or Ivy League institutions have relied on those factors for far too long. But new digital pedagogy impacts on competency-based learning or adaptive learning is going to disrupt that market as well. And they're talking about a marketplace for education, like a LinkedIn marketplace for education rather than universities at all. And I think that's a really interesting viewpoint to keep in mind. Right, so other things. Our users' behaviors have changed as well. You might notice I'm not saying they're changing. They have changed. And we need to accept that to begin with. A lot of us have this issue, including myself. When I look at our users, I say, how are they learning? They're watching a YouTube video and reading an article and have Facebook open and looking at their phones at the same time. That's no way to learn. But that's because I'm literally thinking about how I was learning and what the models between deep learning and shallow learning. But I think one thing that we did through this project, this is a joint project between Lancaster and Stanford, which we extended for the library as well, was to really understand how students are learning. That really challenged us back. And actually we had to accept that that's how they learn and it's okay. So instead of us really pushing our own services for previous models on them, we need to change our services to accept the new models and the new ways of learning in that scheme. And OCLC has produced a report that's from last year, I think, called Transition from User in the Life of the Library to Library in the Life of the User. Again, that's a very interesting report. Highly recommend reading that. But the crux of that report is previously library models were based on our users will come to us. It was very physically driven. Even electronically driven by saying, here are our resources, you come and access them. I think the model is now switching or almost has switched, which is if we really want to keep generating the value of the libraries, we need to integrate ourselves into our users' workflows. We also call it slightly, in a bad term, a bit of a lazy model for our users, which is in the UK, they pay a lot of money They feel entitled to a lot of things. They feel like the information should be at their hands rather than they need to come and find it. And to be fair, we now work in a global environment. So what our staffing at that time is no longer the same staffing for our campus in China or Ghana or somewhere else. And people learn in different ways. You can be physically present here, but you might actually say, oh, I'm not really connecting with Masud and I would like to go back and listen to this session in a recorded fashion. And that's okay, because people learn in different fashions. Some people want to be physically present and learn through listening. Some people rerun the same thing again and again. And that's how adaptive learning works in general, as long as you reach the same ultimate goal. So that's changing a lot as well. All of these are, by the way, hyperlinked at the bottom. So when you get the presentation, you can immediately click on all of those. SCONAL, which is the large organization in the UK supporting the libraries for further education and higher education, has produced a report, quite a recent report, came late last year, called Mapping the Future of Academic Libraries. That's also a very interesting report because that challenged a lot of librarians in the UK, including ourselves, because our immediate reaction, so not mine, because I'm from a digital background, but most other people's immediate reaction was, that's not going to happen. But hopefully by the end of this presentation, I would have scared you enough to realize that that is going to happen. But I'm equally happy to be proven wrong. One of the key things over there, or one of the recommendations or key points from this report, is there is no equivalent menu to the physical library online. What it is a set of disparate resources that we point our users to. And that's very true for the UK market. We don't really, so for a physical library, for example, we create a full user experience, from an induction viewpoint, embedding things into their curriculum, to going all the way and doing advocacy about certain things. But if you really look at the online experience, there's no real equivalence. It's about, oh, if you want to find out about something, here's one page on that, but it's not really a full ecosystem of experience. And I think that's what's really missing, that digital equivalence of experience. And that would only be the starting point, because that's just equating to what we offer physically. And then do you really fully harness the capabilities of digital and say, what else can we offer that we really can't offer physically? And that would be a really interesting area to look at. The report also talks about library in a three kind of role model. As a service provider, which most of us are, we provide lots of services to the institution. As a partner, which we mostly think we are, although I would argue that we like to collaborate but not partner, if there's a slight difference. And leader, which not many of us do in many, many areas. And I think this is an interesting point on how libraries' roles will change in the different landscapes of the institutional agendas. And that's another area that I'll briefly talk about. Another organization in the UK is called Research Libraries UK, RLUK. That's a group of 38 most research-intensive libraries or prestigious research libraries in the UK. And they've just developed their strategy, came in March of this year, called their strategic plan for 2018 to 2021. And they have two core principles in there. One is open scholarship, but the emphasis I would like to make on is creating a new environment. It's that wording that I'll bring to you again and again. So they're talking about creating a new environment for scholarship and transformation of research. And the second element is a collective approach, which is about reshaping modern research library collections. So they are looking at bolder terminologies about, we don't want to extend what we have, we don't want to further build on something we have, but actually we want to create a new environment, or we need to reshape what we have. So I think the UK market is now realizing that actually the models that we had and we built upon for a long time are no longer suitable for the needs of today, and they actually really need to change them all over. Right, so for those who also like to read the NMC reports, NMC has now been acquired by, I think, Educase, so they'll have, there's a new 2018 report that's coming out as well. So this is from the higher education market. So this is not specific to the libraries, but I just want to give you an idea of what higher education would be looking at in the next 2 to 5 years. That's their prediction. Yeah, even I, from a digital background, when I read it, it's very scary to me, because there's a lot of terminology here that I don't feel comfortable with. But there are some that are really interesting. So a few that I would pick. Digital scholarship is mentioned there. That's a big, big topic across the globe at the moment. Internet of Things is mentioned there. So some libraries are, including Lancaster, is working in that arena already. Virtual worlds. So Lancaster University Libraries created a full campus of Lancaster University Library in Minecraft. You might wonder why. And actually the amount of interest we've gained from school students about what university education is by just coming in and playing and breaking stuff in Minecraft about the university campus has really built their confidence in gaining a university education in the future. And also we got lots of media coverage on that, so that was brilliant. First university in the UK to have a Minecraft campus. Wearable technology, of course, is almost ubiquitous to what we do now. Our iPhone would have about 8 or 9 sensors in it, at least. Other things, at least I'll have about 12 or 13 on me if I really think about it. Location intelligence is just so common now. We use Google, I was using Google Maps to come over here, or we use attendance monitoring at Lancaster, which is when you physically enter the room, a beacon picks up your phone and say, you're here. So location intelligence is becoming really, really popular. And some of these are already there. I mean, 3D printing, mixed reality, I'll talk a bit more about. Artificial intelligence is the big, big one. It keeps coming up again and again, and I'll go through that. I won't go through all of these, but I think it just gives you a flavor of what higher education would be looking at from a technology perspective. What does the Library Edition report talk about? So it also talks about lots of technologies, but I've picked up 3 recommendations out of their 10 recommendations. 1, if you want to advance innovative services and operations, we require a reimagining of our organizational structures. Anyone who works in a library would be like, oh, not again. We keep adapting all the time. But unfortunately, that's how it's going to be. There's one library in the UK who have now put this as a part of their strategic plan that they'll reorganize every 5 years anyway. And that's because they realized that every 5 years change would have happened so much that they'll need to reorganize. And if I can say one thing, and you might hate me for saying this, the only constant is change. And if you're not on board of that change, you're not going to be the right people for the libraries in the future. But I'm hoping that's not going to be the case. Enabled by digital scholarship technologies, the research landscape is evolving. The 2 major areas in the UK at the moment are digital humanities and shared infrastructures. So one thing, and I think that might very much be applicable to the Australian library market as well. One of the things that, we went into research data landscape about 4 years ago. So Lancaster University policy was written about 4 years ago on research data, and EPSRC, which is one of our engineering and physical sciences research council, created their recommendations in 2011, so about 6 years ago, 6-7 years ago. So, however, we were very much inspired by Australian National Data Service and the Australian National Data Service's viewpoint on how much it contributes to the economical gain for the Australian government as well. The model was slightly different though. Every institution started building their own research data repository. We have about 153 universities and about 100 plus repositories for research data now. All of them are very archaic and don't work very well. So where's the economies of scale here? So 15 institutions, JISC and the Higher Education Funding Council for England at that time, is now called Research England. Everything is changing its names, by the way, have joined together and said we'll pilot, develop a research data shared service. What we are trying to do is not reinvent the wheel, but just create a shared framework infrastructure that most other vendors can come on to. So we're hoping to get Explorer on board. We're hoping to get, Asphyxia is already on board. JISC's own repository is on board, and we're hoping more vendors will come on the repository element of that. Then there's the preservation element, which is Archivematica and Preservica, which are already on board. And then there's the reporting element of it. So I think there's a big focus on shared infrastructures at this time, not just for research data, but also for open science in general. European market is also going in a similar fashion. So European Commission opened a tender which closed on 25th of May about a large European market shared infrastructure for Horizon 2020 funding. What that meant is anything that's funded by Horizon 2020 will use that platform to put its preprints, postprints, actual published papers, data, project details, DMPs, everything basically. So that platform will become the core repository for any European research that's been conducted through European Council. So these shared infrastructures are really becoming popular. And I think there are some discussions going on between ARC, Australian Research Council, and UKRI, UK Research and Innovation, about developing something together as well. So that's quite positive to see. The other thing, of course, is digital scholarship in general, specifically digital humanities. And at the moment, there is a lot of potential there. There is nothing concrete there, but there's a lot of potential. And I'll talk about, when I talk about what's next, that's another area to look at. And of course, artificial intelligence and Internet of Things are poised to amplify the utility and reach of library services. So not many of us work with these technologies. Not many of us have to work with these technologies, but many of us should know about these technologies. And I think that's the difference. The more we can know about them, the more we can see the potential of them being applied in our services and use the right people for their right expertise to actually elevate some of those services further. Right, Gartner. So from people who have a computer science background like myself, we always like to look at Gartner's projections as well. So not just computer science backgrounds, by the way, of course, anyone else is welcome to look at that as well. So Gartner's top 10 strategic technology trends for 2018, they've classified them as intelligent, digital, and mesh. So the mesh is basically a combination of people, technologies, communication, et cetera, et cetera. There are lots of things, but I'll pick on a few. So AI is always there. Intelligent things is really interesting. So Honda's created a new, so they've got these little sensors in their new cars, which connect to other cars. Dangerous territory, in my opinion, to be in. But what that says is you're stuck in traffic at the beginning of the road. It can communicate from car to car to car to car to very end of the road, saying there's a traffic block at this much distance. If you want to move away into a side road, now is your chance. So that's the phenomenon of intelligent things. And one example I give to my own staff is, wouldn't it be nice if, and it's combined with intelligent things and location intelligence, is if a reader's got books due today and they've left those books which have RFID sensors in their room and they've traveled about, I don't know, 500 meters away from it, it goes a ping on their mobile saying, do you know that your books are due today? Bring them back now. That's possible. The other one I would like to pick up is blockchain. I think that's also a technology that has a lot of potential, none of which is really realized apart from the financial sector at the moment. Gartner predicted as not a 2 to 5 year technology, but as a 10-year technology. But I think because the landscape is so complex in that domain, I think we need to start looking at that pretty much now. Immersive experience is also very interesting. So augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, and libraries are in that landscape quite a bit. Lancaster's done. So we refurbished our library in 2016, but we didn't want to lose the essence of what the library used to look like. So we took lots of pictures and we created these augmented reality tours and touch points across the library. So if you're feeling nostalgic, you take your laptop or tablet up, you stand on those feet and you look at how the library used to look like in 1967 at that time. And that's really interesting because people who come, especially as alumni who really don't have a clue of how the library has changed, can really connect with that. And of course, we're working in the mixed reality domain. So one of the projects we are working on at the moment is people who like to browse shelves often don't like to know or don't search for the electronic items for the same things. So what we are trying to do is build an intelligence system that allows them to put their phone in that slot where the book was supposed to be. And it tells them straight away whether there's an electronic copy for that book here or not. And that's the mixed reality element of merging physical with virtual. So lots of interesting things that really can enhance student experience going forward. Right, so this is from Lancaster University's own vision, Library Towards 2020, which is, I don't want to read it, but I think what I want to say is one of the things we want to really inspire our students to do is stimulate creativity, spark new knowledge, and encourage scholarship to flourish. Vague terminology as part of any typical strategy, but we believe in that. We've also written this, but we are way far behind on this one. What does a comprehensive digital library experience mean if we can't develop that digital library ecosystem? And I think it's just defining in its own right what would be a comprehensive digital library experience is a difficult challenge in its own right. Right, so lots of background. So digital seems to be the common denominator, but is the hype actually real? So I've been talking a lot about it. So how do you trust me on this one? Or should you trust me on this one? So again, I'll pick Gartner as an example. So this is Gartner Hype Cycle from 2010. All the technologies listed here are what Gartner predicted within 2 years or within 5 years. So I gave them some benefit of doubt and said, okay, we'll look at it in 2018 rather than 2015. Gesture recognition, Microsoft Kinect. You can fly drones with gestures now. Cloud computing is almost normal now. So many of us use it. Microblogging, hopefully someone is tweeting this right now. Ebook readers, Kindles, so many of failures in that regard as well, Nook, other things. 3D printing, 3D flat panel TVs and displays, social analytics, wireless charging. Sounded scary at that time when they introduced it, but looking at it about 7 or 8 years down the line, I think all of them are real now. They're all in mainstream practice. So, but that feels normal now. We don't even think twice about having a media tablet or an iPad in our heads or something like that. You don't think twice about it. So the point here is, while it might sound scary, it normalizes over time. Now, of course, I keep saying scary. This is the Gartner Hype Cycle from 2017, the most recent one. And all of these technologies are also what they think we'll realize in 2 to 5 years' time. Serverless platform as a service, deep learning, machine learning, augmented data discovery, edge computing, drones, IoT platforms, cognitive expert advisors, software-defined security, virtual reality. Actually, apart from 4 or 5 of them, I don't know what the others are. Actually, I know briefly what they are, but I don't see how they can really help us in the library. But again, my knowledge is limited. The more I learn about them, the more I can see those possibilities of them being applied in our industry. And I think what I want to give you as some food for thought is, while this might look really, what are these? Don't know. Should we even be learning about this stuff? Come down 2023, this would be being applied in industry again and in mainstream ways. So maybe we need to start looking at that now to really challenge what kind of services we provide. So that's a lot of technology. Let's add data to the mix now. So we've been talking a lot about technology, but what's happening on the data front? So in terms of data, 2010, 5.2 billion internet connected devices. That's just under the world population marker. 0.9 zettabytes of data across the world. Don't ask me what a zettabyte is. I think it's about 1 trillion terabytes, something like that. Content is king. I like to talk about this because content is really important, or was very important in 2010. We would provide a lot of content to our readers. They would find a lot of content. But this is 5 years down the line from the YouTube world. So it's not, content is not massive yet. And the kind of leadership we have in academic libraries, especially in 2010, would primarily be academic leadership. So people who are from a academic liaison background or a subject librarian background or a faculty background, faculty library background, they would be in the top level leadership for university libraries primarily. Right, now let's forward this to 2017, the last full completed year. So 28.4 billion internet connected devices now, 17 zettabytes of data. Context is kingdom. So content is of course important, but without the context in which it's created, you're not really sure how good that content is. The phenomenon of fake news itself, that's content through and through, but is it the right content? I think that's a really interesting element to consider as well. And the kind of leadership we should be having, if not, is academic with elements of digital in it. So academic leaders who are not really tuned into digital elements just yet need to start really acting up on that. Now, this is what I'm going to, well, this is not my prediction, actually, this is prediction from lots of other agencies. In 2025, we'll have 80 to 100 billion internet connected devices. So if you look at the trajectory of world population growth, that's about 10 to 12 devices per person. So we are about 7.7 billion people at this time. By 2025, that would be about 8.5 billion. So that's a lot of devices. Not all of them have to be on us. They're all sensor-based devices, other things, but there are a lot of devices. We are looking at mass explosion of data here. So from 0.7 to 17 to 180 zettabytes of data. We are developing research data services. How are we going to store all of this data? How are we going to make it really useful? How is FAIR going to work? FAIR is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Can we really do that? Lancaster's vice chancellor is very keen. He always keeps asking me, why are we storing all this data and what's the value? And if I'm being very honest, I can't answer that. I don't think many people can answer that at this time. I do give them the example of Australian National Data Service, which is conservative estimate of national economical contribution of $1 billion and $6 billion is the non-conservative one. But the kind of technologies or the kind of areas we need to focus on is cognitive load reduction. There will be so much information coming through that actually you really need to provide that information that's really relevant. You can't just give everything to everyone. So personalization services would become really important. And context brokering will become very important. That's a new role for the library on actually doing that brokering for the context of, is this the right thing for you? Exclude all, which we do, by the way, already, just at scale. I think that would be the difference. And my prediction is we need more digital leadership at the top of the libraries. There's no way otherwise we can keep up with the change in pace of technology. Right, so the scale and pace is mind-boggling, but do our staff have relevant digital skills to handle that? Right, so before I start on that, I'll give you a few seconds to think about that yourself. And then I'll show you something that statistically is coming from the UK market. Right, so remember that report I talked about, Mapping the Future of Academic Libraries by Sconnell? So they also asked many library directors and other people about what that digital skills gap is, or skills. In fact, what they were looking at is what are the most important skills for you in the future? So this is what they were saying. Strategic management is the most important skill. So the yellow line is the critically important, followed by important, followed by not important, followed by don't know, from top to bottom. So strategic management, understanding of research process, relationship management, negotiation, user experience design, horizon scanning, metadata, pedagogy, data analysis, etc. So that's the midway target. You might say, why are you talking about all this technology? Because none of that is in the top 5 or 6 skills that people are really thinking are critical, till you look at the demographics element of this. So Sconnell did a lot of this survey from existing library directors. So if you look at the demographics, the number of people from 46 to 65 is greater than the number of people below that. So I think Sconnell, and I've given them this feedback already, that actually if you really want to know what's going to happen in the library, ask people who are just graduating, or ask people who are just coming into the library business, or ask other parties, which they have done, but not enough of. And one other thing that came from this report is libraries are very good at collaboration, but with other libraries. They don't really collaborate with anyone else in the institution, because that really challenges them, and sometimes very harsh question like, why do you have to be called a library? You're just a learning space or a place for books. And that perception really needs to be changed. Last year, I also did a survey. So I was doing a piece of research about where I believe, so this is skills in general, but I was looking at particularly digital skills. And actually, I wasn't interested in what digital skills. I was interested in people's viewpoint of whether they are ready for the change. So these are the results from that survey. So I asked them a lot of questions, but I'll only talk about 3. So the first question is, how confident are you that you have the skills that would be relevant to the needs of research libraries in 2025? So the good news here is a lot of people are either very confident or moderately confident. So looking at that, 77% are very confident or moderately confident. Only 4% are worried. So that's in general a good sign, because we still have time till 2025. We can build those skills, we can work on that, etc. Then I asked, how confident are you to be able to cope with technological changes that would be coming our way by 2025? And again, massively confident in overall. 24% are very confident and 62% are moderately confident. So that's 86% are quite confident. And then I said, in your own view, do you think that you can learn new technologies quickly? if I'm being fair, that's a badly worded question because people said, depends on the technology. So quite a few of them have said sometimes because it's dependent on the technology. But again, if you look at yes and sometimes, that's still quite a strong number. Then it made me thinking, I was like, do people really know what's going to come our way in 2025? And then the next question I was asking is, are we really ready? Or is this an example of Dunning-Kruger effect? And Dunning-Kruger effect is a psychology term about people who don't know enough think they are very good at it. The more you know, the less confident you are about your own capabilities or your own skills. Right. So in my opinion, I think we need to take a kind of a cumulative approach towards these digital skills development. One, we need emphasis from the top. We need digital leadership at the top, which can really promote that across libraries. We also need confidence building. So one of the pet statements I say to any conference presentation or to my own team is confidence is more important than capability. If you are confident, you can learn stuff. If you're not confident and you're extremely capable, you'll never bring that to the surface and it won't ever facilitate the library. That's my perspective on it. I think ideally you want people who are confident and capable, but confidence in my perspective is more important to learn, especially the digital way of thinking. We need to start working on digital skills. We need to start working on code clubs, different kind of experiences that come with digital, and most importantly, digital way of thinking. Digital skills is not learning a new tool. Of course, that's part of it. But it's about a different way of thinking. It's about experimentation. It's about breaking a problem into logical chunks and trying to solve them. It's all those standard things. Flowcharts. Anyone who can do flowcharts will by default be able to do digital skills to some degree. And it's that way of thinking, that way of playing around with things, trying them. I think that's where the confidence elements comes in as well. And micro-learning. One of the things I'm very passionate about is there's no point in developing an hour-long training session online for someone because they tune out in about 5 minutes. Actually, what you want is really small pieces of quick learning, which you can learn in 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, just one thing at a time. Because the way our memories are, or the kind of information we have now at our landscape, we just need a good small piece of information that we can retain rather than long tutorials or anything. That's also true for our students. Right, moving on to the third element, libraries as incubators of scholarly development. So I'm quite passionate about this area because I think, personally, we're always a bit behind the curve. We always see what the vendors have done, and then we see how can we use it. And we are always in that service provider model. So how can we use something to provide a service to our users? Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's not the only model we should be working on. And I'll briefly mention that. So again, I'll quote some of I don't want you to read through all of this, but what I want to point from this report, so Sconnell, while they were working on this report, I don't think are brave enough. Because what they are saying is we need to carry out investigation and development of services, or we need to investigate the possibilities of developing collaborations. It's all a bit about investigation. Let's just touch this area and see if something comes out or not. Investigation is important, but that doesn't show the ambition enough, in my opinion. However, the MIT report of Future of Libraries, again, quite a good report to read if you get a bit of time, is far more ambitious. They talk about bold experimentation. They talk about new ways of producing knowledge and information. They talk about revolutionary new methodologies for delivering services. They are not holding back. They are saying, actually, we really need to change. And that's very interesting, that difference between mentality from an American side of things and the UK side of things. So, risk and innovation. Again, I talk about innovation a lot, but I think we need to take more calculated risks. And Lancaster is quite good at it, personally speaking, because we take more risks in a service provider role than many of other libraries. So we were one of the very early ALMA adopters. We were the third site to go live in the whole world. We signed the ALMA agreement without even looking at what ALMA was. It was called URM at that time. There was no visual image that we could see. But because we were LF user and we trusted the ideology of where the systems were going, we signed the contract even before we knew it was happening. Not that it was without pain. Risk innovation comes with pain, but it allowed us to develop a lot of core services at an early stage. Students are digital natives. You might not agree with it. Some other people also don't agree with it. So there's a counter argument down there. But I do believe in that, and they learn and they work in different ways. If they are the digital natives, why should we do the innovation for them? Why can't they do the innovation for us? And actually, that's a student-led innovation model that we are really looking at. So Lancaster ran a large student-led innovation event called George the Library. Manchester ran one called Eureka. In fact, they've run it multiple times. Lancaster's going to run it again next year. And the idea is that we'll ask our students to give ideas on how to improve the library with the commitment that the winning idea will be developed regardless, and that the library will have no input into actually deciding what the winning idea is. That will be an independent panel outside of the university. Very, very brave decision to make. Of course, we had criteria to say, don't go crazy. Affordability, realism, and other things are a part of it. And we had some crazy ideas. Change the library roof with glass roof. Develop a cat cafe in the library. Forgetting allergies about cats, anything else like that. But we had some fantastic ideas as well. So the winning idea was about student well-being. And it was a Kickstarter project at that time, a product called Dharma Cushions. And the idea is that you can borrow a Dharma cushion from the library's information desk or a locker. And if you're about to study for a long time, you put that on your chair and you sit on it and you set parameters through your phone. And again, going back to the intelligent apps, and you say, I don't want to slouch more than 25 degrees. I want a break every 50 minutes, and et cetera, those kind of parameters. And if you're slouching a lot, the cushion will buzz and say, get up. Yeah, sounds weird, I agree, but it does work. Or if you've been sitting on it for more than 50 minutes, it will give you a buzz, and it will, and the app will also show you what good exercises are to relax and to improve posture. Some students still don't care, so we were thinking whether we can introduce a slight electric shock in there as well. But no, our ethics committee did not approve that. But there were lots of quick wins as well. More plants in the library, height adjustable desks. One of the ideas that wasn't successful but was very interesting, and I mentioned this in my last presentation, and someone said there's a better way to do it. And I said, actually, yeah, there is. Because the idea was that we should have writable walls that once you've written on, you press a button and it knows who you are and sends the whole wall context to you or content to you in an email. Someone said, surely they can just take a picture of it. I'm like, that's true, actually, they can. So yeah, sometimes ideas don't work as well. But I think what I wanted to say is we need to be a bit bold in our experimentation, accepting of student innovation, picking the terminologies from the MIT Future of Libraries report, and really want to start, this is my feeling, that we really want to start looking at AI, machine learning, blockchain, and mixed reality. I think those are the 4 areas, in my opinion, we really should start looking at. Right, so lots of challenges. Let's start tackling them. So I'll be quick on this one because I've been given my warning. There are only 2 slides on this. So first, we need to start changing our approach. So we need to start more in digital leaders. We need to start investing more in digital futures. We need to start looking at micro and macro elements. We don't need to have grand plans to change everything digitally. Start on small things, small options, as well as looking at the larger picture. And invest in innovation. Develop platforms in your libraries, develop groups for innovation, cross-cut them through hierarchies, because that's where really good ideas and diversity of thinking comes in. We need to change our behaviors or understand our users' behaviors better. So one thing I quite often promote is behavior-driven service improvement. So look at how our users are using the library services, and I'll talk a bit about that in my next slide as well. And invest in analytics in the library. It's a very volatile world, at least in the UK, it's a very volatile world. And often people say, how can we do innovation if we also want to provide all these services that we provide? So the model I give them is actually we can do more creative thinking around that. Can we do some different way of providing the same service? So provide consistent services, but through different approaches. So add creativity elements, entrepreneurship elements, learn from others, etc. And context. So again, I've mentioned this briefly. We need to invest in cognitive load reduction, personalization. Why should everyone see the same library website? If you're a student, you should see a different view. If you're a researcher, you should see a different view. Why do you have to go 3 levels down to find the information you need? Why can't you just see what's relevant to you straight in? But when I raise that with our library staff, the typical response is, but then it would look different, and how can we help our users if they ask us a question? Surely you can switch views as well. So again, it's that kind of barriers you have to go through. And invest in kind of staff that might not make sense yet, but is the right kind of staff. So invest in data scientists, invest in research software engineers, invest in data visualization experts in your libraries, because that's where the future of research support and other support would be. Right, ecosystems, I've talked about that. Interoperability is my big bugbearing. We have so many systems who don't work well with each other. So add it in your procurement contracts that you should have open APIs. So Exlibris is good at that, but not many other vendors are. Embed library in research questions and processes. So instead of us being the end party for a research outcome, i.e. publication or data, be the starting party and work throughout the research lifecycle. So that can really change the perception of the library. 3 areas where I think we can really do well is digital health, digital scholarship, and digital humanities. Experiment, natural language conversation. So we are developing Alexa skills at the moment at Lancaster. So people can come and say, Alexa, renew my books. This is my ID. Or Alexa, what are library's opening hours for today? Or Alexa, where are the nearest toilets? Because that's the question that's asked again and again and again. So why can't we use our staff for something more efficient than just answering the same thing again and again? And chatbots. People are not always physically in the library. They can use that to ask remotely. Data visualizations, text and data mining, linked open data, deep learning, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And benchmark services. And in libraries, we provide a lot of services. Sometimes we benchmark them, but we don't do that consistently across the board. And that's the only way we can continuously improve. Benchmark them, introduce industry standards like customer satisfaction scores or net promoter scores in the mix, and learn from different industries. That's the core to innovation. Just be accepting of what other industries do. And I mentioned, what does behaviors or intelligence mean? So this is my typical slide I talk about, from analytics to intelligence. And in my viewpoint, you need to start. So the core of it is intelligence. That's the end result we want to reach at. But we need to start with gathering data and analytics, which we do a lot in general. Then we need to add the context layer. So who is this person who's using this? What were they studying? Why were they in the library? Then we look at their behaviors on that basis. If they were in the library, what were they doing? Were they trying to access a book? Were they trying to do so? Ethnographic approaches, photojournalism, lots of other concepts come in. And only when you can combine those 3 elements, you can truly have intelligence for your decision making. Because we make a lot of decisions on analytics, but we need to make intelligent decisions based on intelligence. And this is just a glimpse of some of the things we are doing in digital futures arena. So steady space occupancy, the big issue in UK. Every time you create more steady space, it goes away. People are where is all this steady space you promised? So can we provide individual desk occupancy so people can know exactly where free desks are? And then we can add more intelligent stuff, where my friends are, or where this particular book is. And that kind of intelligence can come in the future. User experience and library journey. So we did this project where we placed about 100 plus little beacons across the library to understand how our users are using the library and how they're moving across the library. That was really, it was a failure, by the way, as a project, but we learned a lot from it. And the 2 quick wins that came out was our infrastructure was not ready, and we need better ways of doing this. But it's okay, we failed, so what? We learned from it, move on. Mixed reality, so we're doing a workshop on mixed reality, looking at Alexa skills, the project I talked about, which allows you to find out ebooks in physical shelves and other things. Natural language touchpoints, again, Alexa. Gesture control, so we have these screens in the library, which talk about different news and different elements, but it also shows the bus timetables. Our users are really interested in the bus timetables. They don't really care about library news. But because it's on a timer slider, if they've just missed the slide for the bus timetables, they need to wait for about 1 minute and 20 seconds on average for it to come back again. Why can't we just introduce some gesture controls so they can say, no, it's not this slide, not this slide, not this slide. And then we worked on a project with our computer science department, said, you don't even need that. Just allow them to have an app on their phone and they can select what they want to see. And as soon as they come close enough, it automatically changes to what their preferences are. So again, quite interesting. Mood-aware spaces. One thing I'm really keen on is there's a lot of research on how different lighting, different sounds can really affect how you study. We really can create those kind of individual study spaces that are mood-aware, so that can really benefit people when they're studying. Personalization I've already touched upon, and blockchain I've already touched upon as well. Right, my last 2 slides. So my own personal feeling about areas of investment of scholarly development. So while we are investing on a lot on research, data storage, and preservation, we really should also be starting to think about smarter data discovery. Because what's the point of storing and preserving all this data if we can't really do smarter discovery for that data? We need to look at intelligent digital humanities, not a digital humanities repository that can store images and artifacts and bring them back, but actually that can make connections with other parties across the world. Pattern recognition, other things that can really build that intelligence in digital humanities repository. So we're about to embark on a next generation digital humanities repository in the UK. Text and data mining. Again, if things are becoming open access, lots of possibilities for text and data mining, lots of new metrics. If anyone is interested in bibliometrics, also look at semantometrics, because that's really going to change how open access and text and data mining can change that landscape. Personalized services I've already talked about. Enabling global digital citizenship. So students, here's a fun fact, very quickly. University of York ran a phishing exercise with their own students and staff, badly worded email, hoping nobody would click on the link, and 60% of all users clicked on it. These are digitally native students. So digitally native is not equivalent to being digitally aware or digitally globally citizen in that landscape. And mixed reality I've already mentioned as well. And in terms of global challenges, these are not really limited to UK or Australia. These are global challenges. Some of them are wicked in nature. So research data, for example, is a wicked problem. You can't really solve it. You can have the best attempt to solving it, but you can't really solve it. And we may not be able to solve all of these, but if you're embarking on them, we may be able to make progress. But that requires us to develop stronger partnerships for innovation, not for accepting products, but for innovation. The ANZREG community, the Igloo community, Luna communities are brilliant. There's a lot of innovation that comes out of it, but it's specific to a particular domain. Is our library looking at similar things in other domains? I think that's the question I would raise. And last but not least, we need to also really embark on the partner and leader elements of the library, not just service provider. So are we a leader in the University for Learner Analytics? Are we a leader to provide support for ERA? Are we a leader in another domain? I think that's the question I would really like to raise. A quotation from a non-library person. So this is by Mike Byrne, who's the managing director for Accenture. He's a bit bold. I wouldn't put it as crudely as he has, saying there's no turning back from digital in higher education. The digital demand is real. Higher education institutions must start making the grade or risk irrelevance in the digital era. Lots of people have made these predictions. I don't think there's any danger of irrelevance. I think there's a danger of us becoming not very good at student experience or at innovation. And I think that is a danger. And the question is not of if, but of when, basically. So thank you for listening. Sorry, I didn't talk much about Ex Libris, but I thought there would be lots of opportunities to talk about Esploro or anything else. If you want to talk about ALMA, Esploro, Leganto, digital preservation systems, or anything on research landscape, or the impact of digital on pedagogies, or anything else, please just ask me. That's no problem at all. Thank you again for your time. That would be great, yeah.
Thanks very much, it was great. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was intrigued by the Minecraft project, and it sort of sparked a question in my mind. By far the majority of library users today, particularly in universities, are digital native, as you said, if not the wider web community. A lot of those users are also gamers. And I'm intrigued by the increasing sophistication of gaming technology and whether this technology can be applied to learning. I think it already is, but the implications, I think, are quite tremendous, because if artificial landscapes and immersion technologies become as rich and as sophisticated as they are becoming, the ability to sort of invest them with real knowledge, real data that you can learn from and build the future as well as look at the past is incredible. So just wanted your thoughts on that.
Excellent question. Thank you for that. So one of my other remits is also to lead on the digital research for the university. So we have a digital Lancaster strategy, which has 3 elements. One of them is called digital research, the other one is digital teaching and learning, and the third one is digital engagement. It goes back to the library as leaders, so we really pushed ourselves into the digital research arena. And one of the elements in there is to look at how compute-intensive research can really change the landscape of things across the board. One of the very interesting conversations we are having at the moment is how compute-intensive itself is changing over time. So let's pick artificial intelligence as an example, or machine learning. Previously, a lot of that work was being done on high core processors, basically, so processing power. Then it went into a mixture of processing and memory, RAM-based computing. But most of the intelligence research or artificial intelligence and machine learning research that's happening now is all based on GPU-based architectures. The reason, so GPUs are the graphical processing units that are also used a lot in the gaming systems and computing, high gaming computing powers as well. And the idea behind that is a GPU is a super fast computing chip, as well as has a lot of memory in it, and it works a lot more faster than anything else. So some of the discussions or some of the trajectories we've seen is, one, how our users are more gaming native, and people who are really into their gaming would actually know ins and outs of what their architectures are, how fast PS4 Pro would work in comparison to Xbox One or Xbox 360, or what this Radeon GPU chip would do in comparison to this NVIDIA GPU chip, etc., for their computers. And we are trying to build that into some of our thinking of how we can promote that, especially in our computer science graduates or engineering graduates, to come into fields of research into artificial intelligence, using that knowledge of their enthusiasm about gaming and bring that into the research elements and introduce them to new domains as well. Without going into too much technical details, there's a very interesting article. Just Google artificial intelligence and cats. So Google ran this project. They had about 14,000 servers in a large farm. And what they have literally changed the way artificial intelligence works. And that's a bit scary, because artificial intelligence or machine learning primarily was worked in a supervised way, i.e. a human would say, this is a human hand, this is a cat, this is this. And then the machine would learn on that basis and try to recognize similar shapes and similar patterns, say, oh, I think because I've been told this is a cat, this might also be a cat. But this training required lots and lots of training. So you can't just show one cat, you have to show thousands and thousands of cats for it to accurately recognize other cats. The new dimension in artificial intelligence is unsupervised learning, where there is no human input. Literally, what they did was they took screenshots of millions of YouTube videos, and they said, try to recognize it based on the comments and the context of those images. And the machine automatically now said, this is a cat, this is a human hand, this is this is that, this is a football. And there was no real human input into that. So, and that's all done through GPU-based technology as well. So I think the domain is changing rapidly. It's depending on how we can really enthuse our staff to come into that domain. What's not clear though, is how that translates into other industries, how that comes into the library domain. And I think one of the things that we can really do or benefit from is being involved in some of those discussions to have that kind of base level knowledge of how some of that can be used in the library world. So when I was talking about the Next Generation Digital Humanities Repository, it's a project that's not yet been established, but we are in conversations. That's a project between Cambridge, Manchester, Lancaster, York, and Edinburgh. That's the common parties looking at it. And the idea is that we all have really interesting collections, but they're all in independent repositories. And actually none of them make connections. So we have this really interesting 18th century collection on trade, basically between Lancaster and Barbados, but also slave trade at that time. There are really interesting collections in lots of University of West Indies and other things that we don't know how to connect with. So what we are trying to develop is something that can harness the potential of those technologies, the infrastructure, to do pattern matching, learn and say, oh, this handwriting is 90% matched to this handwriting, or the context of this based on the transcriptions is a 90% match with the context of this transcription. They might be connected. And a human is training that element in the first instance, but those matches are being done automatically. So I think that's the kind of arena we really are looking for in the future, about those intelligent kind of infrastructures we can develop on those technologies. The Minecraft thing was really interesting because that had a different purpose. That was to really allow people to see what happens in a university. So the gaming part was just a starting point. And then there were sessions about, look, if you come in and you do this, you can then do this in the future, or to build their interest in engineering, or to build their interest in computing in general. And that was quite successful in that way. Lots of enthusiasm from school students, some as young as about 6 or 7 years old. So really promising to see.
Hi, Masud, how are you going?
Oh, hi, Dave.
Just a quick one for you. With more and more collection of personal data and personalisation to the services and stuff like that, how do you see that rapid development being affected by privacy legislations like the GDPR and other similar privacy legislations?
Sure, you've touched on my pain point there. Yeah, I was leading the GDPR implementation for the library. And I think there are two core issues there. One is how GDPR or a similar legislation impacts on what we do, but also on research data. That's a completely different ballgame. So easy proxy logs is a good example. So one thing that we really, our academic services team really wants to do is understand departmental level usage of easy proxy and how different resources are being used at different departments. Lots of presentations in ANZREG about that kind of thing as well. We have a lot of data there, including their IDs. So if you really want to get more data from it, we can. But one of the principles we are introducing, and that was a difficult one to introduce, was privacy by design, i.e., if you don't need it, you shouldn't have it. So people wanted access to all those logs, as well as the anonymized aggregated data, as well as having access to the passwords. Why? If you don't need it, you shouldn't have it. But it's the mindset. If someone junior who needs it for operational needs is doing work with that, they would automatically think that their boss and their boss should also have access to the same credentials. And that's not needed. If it's not needed, they shouldn't have it. And that was a difficult thing to introduce across the board. Of course, it impacts on how we store data in Alma. So we were quite bad at that. We still are quite bad at that. We had date of births in Alma. We had gender in Alma. They are sensitive personal data according to GDPR legislations. So we removed that. Some of our staff have used the notes field to add really complicated things like mental health issues. That shouldn't be there. So we're removing that. And that's a more tedious process than anything else. And it's across the board. There are so many systems used for so many different things that we have to audit them all. And in fact, we have done that. And we're removing as much of that personal data as possible. When it comes to research data itself, that's a completely different ballgame, because so research processes, most people think are exempt, but they are not truly when you really look at the details of it. So we need to build a really strong ethics process to include some of those consent-based ethics straight away. So no implicit consent, always explicit consent. That's what we've added. So the Library Journeys project, for example, where we're tracking how users are moving across the library, we moved on explicit consent. We gave them sweets. They were happy to sign that consent by bribing them, as well as other things. So I think we are moving into a very explicit consent domain. We are moving into privacy by design domain. And if somebody doesn't need that data, they shouldn't have it. In research data, it's a very different ballgame. And one example I'll give you is Lots of researchers used to create videos to promote their research, but with their partners without explicit consent. But just to give you an example, you can take a screenshot of an image, you can create a 3D model out of it, and if you have access to their iPhone or their Samsung Galaxy S9, you can unlock it using that. And that's the domain, or that's the world we live in. So lots of implications in how data is delivered, or how you obfuscate it as much as possible, or how you aggregate, anonymize, et cetera, et cetera. It's not to say you can't do it. It's just that you've taken all the necessary steps to avoid that kind of issues.
Time for one more question.
You spoke a lot about innovation, very important to libraries. I was just wondering if you could talk about methods of innovation. Obviously, when you start with an idea to the implementing something,
yeah,
it can be a long or short process, and the successfulness of that is dependent on that process. So
yeah. I will forward you a link to one of my 6-minute presentations, micro presentation. So you can, I talk about different models of innovation on that one, but I can briefly answer that now. So when we were starting, this same question came from our staff: where do we start? What kind of models we can adopt? And there are, so part of innovation is learning through that journey as well. So you try, you experiment with different things, and you learn through that. So 4 models of innovation at Lancaster University Library. Forced innovation, where we don't have a choice. Government legislation has come in, university has to do it, we have to do it. How can we do it creatively? I think that's the question. Randomized innovation, which is introducing different people together, different ideas, different teams together. So you're not living in the same bubble, you're actually beyond that, and you're getting diversity of thinking in there. Strategic leadership innovation, which is while we really want to hear what our students talk about, there's a lot of discussion on this mode of if, when Steve Jobs was introducing iPod, for example, he did a lot of focus groups and case studies with users at that time saying, what do you want? And they said cassettes, which can hold more songs, and a smaller Walkman. That was their thinking, because they've not seen anything else. So you need to read between the lines, and you really need to do more ethnographic studies and understand what users really want rather than what they tell you what they want. And the 4th one is, it will come to me, but what goes in parallel to that is also a different way of thinking. So one of the issues I face or I've tried to correct is we live in a very realistic critical world. By default, 80%, by default, you would be listening to me, and anything that I would say new to you, your immediate thinking should be, according to research, 80% negative. And it's only after time and after thinking that that becomes more normalized. 80% of the time people think, oh no, that's not right, or that doesn't work for me, or it won't work in our library, or those things. That's just research that proves that across the board. But one thing we really adopted is the Disney model of innovation. Disney model of innovation asks you to be in 3 different mindsets. So for the first part of that discussion, you have to be in a dreamer world. And nobody can say, how will we actually do this? Or nobody can say, oh, that's not going to work in our library or in our place. You have to just be very open about everything. You discuss ideas in that way. Then you move to the realism world, where you say, actually, how will we do it? Do we have enough money to do it? Do we have enough staffing to do it? And only in the 3rd stage, you move to the critical one. And you say, actually, should we even be doing it in the first place? And the reason behind that is Disney's perspective on this is ideas are often not allowed to flourish enough before they are crumpled. And it's that trajectory. You need enough time for an idea to really sink in or really flourish before you can really criticize it. And I think that's a really interesting model. You don't have, so in Lancaster, we do it in 3 different meetings. So we give some time in the middle for people to think about it. Same idea discussed in 3 meetings, but we've also successfully done it in the same meeting. So you can have an hour-long meeting, 20 minutes in a dreamer world, 20 minutes in the real world, and 20 minutes in a critical world. And that's worked really well to spark that creativity as well. And design thinking practices. As many design thinking practices you can incorporate, 6 hats of thinking, Disney model, et cetera, and that's always very good. Good. Again, any questions later on? Very, very happy to speak with you about any of these topics.
I hate interrupting this because it is absolutely fascinating and there's so many questions I can feel coming from the floor, but I just want to thank you very much, Masud, from the committee and from the conference attendees for a really stimulating keynote and great start to our conference. So if you just join me in thanking Masud again. And we're now going to take quite a brief break. We need to be back ready to start again at 10:45, so you don't have to travel